Our monopolized society. Racism in America has gone through a number of mutations. Though always retaining its inequities, it is now particularly practically impossible for members of our society to see improved racism against black people. It is now hidden behind a pseudo egalitarian smokescreen. Social conservatives and the power elite praise Martin Luther King Jr., picked up the rhetoric of the black civil rights movement, but distorted the fundamental intent of the movement. They proclaimed that racial inequality no longer existed and all groups were starting out even, though this created an illusion. Just like the drunk who took his pet alligator into a bar, cut off his tail, painted it yellow, and called it a dog, social conservatives and the power elite are taking racism through similar false transformations. However, no matter how it is camouflaged, racism is still right before our eyes. Old fashioned racism has gone legitimate again, masquerading with all of the rights and privileges of approved monopolies. The word monopoly emanates from the word monarch. According to Charles R. Geiss, the author of Monopolies in America, the tradition of monopolies was inherited from English common law. The British Crown granted patent letters to merchants, giving them exclusive right to provide certain goods or services. Any monopoly conveys the ultimate source of power, wealth, and control to a person, group, or business. When a business entity has a monopoly, it dominates and controls nearly all aspects of an industry and can use its massive power to raise barriers to control markets and bankrupt competitors. A racial monopoly, like any other monopoly, is defined by its origin and the power it has over its competitors. On its way to becoming the essence of various white monopolies, racism has passed through three monopolistic stages. The first stage is a natural monopoly that protects things that are strategically vital to the government itself. In race matters, whiteness and all of its ramifications was always strategically vital and invaluable, entitling its bearer to wealth, privileges, authority, power, and certain inalienable rights. The United States Constitution codified whiteness as a national asset. Various state and local governments passed anti miscegenation laws that defined whiteness and protected it from race mixing. The second is a collusive monopoly. This monopoly exists when members of a tightly knit group of public agencies or private corporations enter into specific agreements to control the marketplaces or the wealth, power, and resources of a society over their common competitor. In race matters, it is a collusive monopoly when this nation continuously expands the definition of whiteness to include a hierarchy of ethnic groups. Today it includes a succession of immigrants from Europe, the Middle East, Spanish speaking countries, and Asia. All of these groups are unified as members of the Caucasian race, with the exception of blacks and Asians. And according to Andrew Hacker, Asians are on probation to be classified as white. Immigration laws are examples of specific agreements that control marketplaces, wealth, and power. These laws establish new priorities for admissions. Country of origin, family members who are already here, possession of needed skills, and the financial ability to purchase entry. This criteria is biased toward immigrants with skin color that is more acceptable than black. The third stage is a shared monopoly. This is a popular term used in the business world today. A shared monopoly is a composite of a collusive and natural monopoly. It reaches its maximum effectiveness when members of a group work together to control or drive competition out of the marketplace. Small businesses have federal antitrust laws to protect them from the power of large corporate monopolies, but there are no constitutional or government provisions that prevent the white society and its feeder immigrant groups from shutting blacks out of political and economic marketplaces. A brief history of monopoly building in America. Over the course of this nation's history, there have been at least three major phases of monopoly building for wealth and power. The first monopoly building phase in American history occurred during the colonization of America, when Europeans in general and the English in particular formed and held natural monopolies in land ownership, slave trading, and slavery supported industries. England exerted the power of its newly found slavery based wealth by instituting the Navigation Act in the 1760s and other laws and tariffs that mandated that American colonists ship their slave produced raw products and goods to England for processing, manufacturing, and marketing. The colonists then had to purchase back the finished products at higher and inflated prices. This system effectively allowed England to exercise full economic and political control and to economically exploit its colonies as well as other nations. England became the king of slave trading and held a natural monopoly on constructing slave-based economies. The English crown established the first franchising system that built plantations, financed the slaveholders, supplied the slaves, and shipped and processed the slave-produced goods. It took a full century for American colonists to recognize that they were locked into an English monopoly. Once the reality set in, they began calling those monopolies tyranny. The American colonies rejected England's plans to expropriate the fruits of slave labor and to control the politics of the colonies. The colonists knew from the English history of serfdom that any system that politically subordinates, economically exploits, and socially dominates a group of people is tyrannical because it reduces them to slaves. The colonists did not want to be England's serfs. They preferred to fight, and when they did, they ignited and fought the Revolutionary War for their independence. The second phase of monopoly building began shortly after the Revolutionary War. The American colonists immediately drafted the United States Constitution, which imposed on black people the same government-sponsored tyranny that the colonists rejected under the English rule. The founding fathers of this nation, most of whom were slaveholders and sympathetic to other slaveholders, drafted and ratified the United States Constitution. That document gave the colonial slaveholders a collusive monopoly, the same monopolistic controls that England had over the colonists before the war. Just as slave labor had made England wealthy, it allowed Southern slaveholders to operate in their own best interests rather than the best interests of Northern whites or enslaved blacks. The North eventually concluded that it could not acquire competitive wealth and political power until it broke the South's monopoly on black labor. In 1861, the Civil War broke out between the North and South over wealth and political power. The third phase of monopoly building occurred after the North won the Civil War. The war effectively destroyed legalized slavery and transferred the South's monopolies on wealth and political power to the North. The North focused its newly acquired wealth and power on industrializing the North and the West. The massive amounts of money previously invested in the slave industry and the Civil War military production was used to build bridges, canals, railroads, ships, and factories. However, in achieving the political and economic defeat of the South, the North had ignored the 5 million ex-slaves.